On June 21, 2025, a date that would forever be etched in the annals of international conflict, the world was stunned, caught completely off guard by events that rapidly unfolded in the Middle East. In a move that sent shockwaves across the globe, Israel launched a sudden, unannounced airstrike, a preemptive measure they would later defend as critical for their national security. The target, a site located deep inside Iran. Israeli jets piercing through the airspace targeted a critical weapons development site, a facility shrouded in secrecy and believed to be at the heart of Iran's advanced military programs. The justification for the attack was clear, at least from Israel's perspective. They claimed the site was actively producing long-range missiles, capable of reaching Israeli territory. Furthermore, intelligence suggested the facility was also developing advanced drones, posing an imminent threat to the region. These weapons, according to Israeli officials, threatened Israel's very security and necessitated immediate action. The operation, meticulously planned and executed, was swift and precise, minimizing collateral damage, or so Israel claimed. In the aftermath, Israel defended its actions on the world stage, calling it a necessary act of self-defense, a preemptive strike to avert a future catastrophe. The attack, however, marked a dramatic escalation in the already volatile relationship between Israel and Iran, crossing a red line that had been carefully maintained, or so many had hoped. It was a dangerous move in the long-standing shadow conflict between the two nations, a conflict fueled by deep-seated animosity and competing regional ambitions. Iran's state media, initially tight-lipped, confirmed explosions at a military facility, acknowledging the attack but downplaying its significance. Details were scarce in the immediate aftermath, with Iranian authorities carefully controlling the flow of information. The international community, caught between condemnation and cautious diplomacy, braced for fallout, understanding the gravity of the situation. The strike was seen as a bold gamble, a high-stakes move with potentially catastrophic consequences. It was a spark that could ignite a wider war, drawing in regional and global powers. Tensions that had simmered for years, bubbling beneath the surface of diplomatic posturing and proxy conflicts, had now erupted into open conflict, a dangerous new chapter in the region's history. The world watched with bated breath, anxiously awaiting Iran's response, knowing that the next move could determine the fate of the Middle East. The targeted site's significance to Iran's military capabilities could not be overstated, making a measured response almost impossible. This attack was a direct challenge, and retaliation was almost certain, a matter of national pride and strategic necessity. The Middle East was suddenly thrust violently and unexpectedly into its most dangerous crisis in decades, a precipice overlooking a potential regional war. The question was no longer if Iran would respond to this brazen act of aggression, but how soon and how severe that response would be and what form it would take. The world held its breath, waiting to see what form that response would be and what the consequences would entail. Following the strike, Iran wasted no time at all. The response was carefully calculated, yet swift in its execution. In responding to Israel's strike with a display of force intended to send a clear message, within hours, the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, unleashed a barrage of fire. Waves of missiles and drones were launched, saturating the airspace. The targets were carefully selected: Israeli military bases and critical infrastructure. Air raid sirens blared across Israel, a piercing warning cutting through the night. Iron Dome interceptors lit up the night sky in a dazzling yet terrifying display, attempting to neutralize the incoming threat. But despite the Iron Dome's capabilities, some projectiles broke through the defensive shield, finding their mark. This caused significant damage and widespread panic among the civilian population. Iranian state TV, broadcasting live, declared victory, celebrating what they portrayed as a successful operation. The Iranian government framed the attack as justified self-defense, a necessary response to what they deemed Israeli aggression. The IRGC issued a stern warning, stating that any further Israeli aggression or retaliation would trigger an even harsher and more devastating retaliation, escalating the conflict further. In Israel, the government urged citizens to seek immediate shelter, reinforcing the gravity of the situation. The reality of direct war with Iran began to sink in, creating a sense of unease and uncertainty. This rapid and intense exchange of fire marked a dangerous new phase in the already volatile relationship, with both sides demonstrating a clear resolve and significant military capability, raising the stakes considerably. The world watched with bated breath as the conflict threatened to spiral rapidly out of control, potentially engulfing the entire region. The region now stood precariously on the brink, teetering on the edge of a wider, uncontrollable war, a scenario that could have devastating global consequences. As the conflict escalated rapidly, fueled by a complex web of historical grievances and immediate provocations, the United States, a long-standing ally in the region, felt compelled to make its stance unequivocally clear. The White House, after intense deliberations and consultations with key allies, ordered a carrier strike group, a potent symbol of American military might, to the eastern Mediterranean, a strategic move designed to project power and influence in the volatile region. This deployment was a clear signal of strong and unwavering support for Israel, a message intended for both allies and adversaries alike. In addition to the naval deployment, U.S. surveillance aircraft began meticulously monitoring Iranian movements, tracking troop deployments, naval activity, and any other actions that could potentially destabilize the region further. This intelligence-gathering operation was aimed at providing Israel with vital, real-time intelligence, enhancing their situational awareness and defensive capabilities. This multifaceted show of force was primarily meant to deter further escalation of the conflict, sending a clear message that aggression would not be tolerated. However, this assertive stance also carried significant risks, potentially drawing America directly into the heart of the conflict, a scenario that many feared. Unsurprisingly, Israel welcomed the overt display of support, viewing it as a crucial lifeline in a time of great peril. Conversely, Iran vehemently condemned the U.S. actions, denouncing them as those of an active participant and an unwelcome intrusion into regional affairs. In a fiery statement, Iranian officials warned that American assets, both military and civilian, could become legitimate targets for retaliation should the U.S. choose to escalate the situation further. This was a clear indication that any direct U.S. military intervention would be met with a swift and forceful response. The sudden and significant U.S. presence undeniably shifted the strategic balance in the region, creating a new and unpredictable dynamic. This escalation dramatically raised the stakes for all involved, pushing the region closer to the brink of a full-scale war. The eyes of the world were now fixed, not just on Tehran, the center of Iranian power, and Tel Aviv, the heart of Israel, but also on Washington, the decision-making hub of the United States. The ever-present risk of a regional war, a conflict contained within the Middle East, now threatened to expand into a global confrontation, drawing in major world powers and destabilizing the entire international order. The potential for widespread devastation and global instability had never been higher in recent history. The ultimate outcome of this escalating conflict was now inextricably tied to the calculated decisions and strategic maneuvering of global superpowers, each vying for influence and control in this volatile region. The Iran-Israel war quickly rippled across the Middle East. Pro-Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq launched attacks on Israeli positions, opening new fronts and stretching Israel's defenses. Israel responded with airstrikes on militia targets in Syria, turning the country into another battlefield. The risk of miscalculation soared as multiple actors became involved. Borders between Israel, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq became flashpoints with daily military activity. The conflict was no longer just between two nations. It had become a multi-front regional war. The dream of Middle East peace faded as violence spread across borders. The war's outbreak sent shockwaves through the Gulf Arab states. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Qatar raised security at vital sites, fearing the conflict could spill over. Governments issued alerts, bolstered air defenses, and prepared for possible attacks or disruptions. The Gulf's economic lifeline, oil and gas, was at risk, with fears of global supply shocks. Diplomatically, Gulf states called for restraint, careful not to openly side with Israel or Iran. Recent normalization with Israel complicated their position, as public opinion remained wary. The Gulf states walked a tightrope, balancing security, economic interests, and regional alliances. The region's stability and the world's energy supply hung in the balance. The Iran-Israel war dominated global headlines, fueling fears of a wider conflict. Social media exploded with real-time updates, misinformation, and heated debate, making it hard to separate fact from fiction. Hashtags trended worldwide as people shared images, opinions, and calls for peace or revenge. The digital battleground mirrored the chaos on the ground, amplifying division and anxiety. Stock markets tumbled and oil prices soared as the world braced for economic fallout. Ordinary people everywhere worried about the impact on their lives. The crisis was a stark reminder of how quickly a regional war can become a global concern. Pakistan, sharing a border with Iran, responded swiftly to the crisis. Islamabad condemned the Israeli strikes and called for urgent UN intervention. Pakistan closed its border crossings with Iran, citing security concerns and the need to control potential refugee flows. The government prioritized evacuating its citizens from Iran, moving quickly to bring students and pilgrims home. Pakistan offered to mediate, urging de-escalation while remaining cautious not to get entangled. With ties to both the West and Iran, Pakistan's stance was pragmatic, calling for peace, but protecting its own interests. For Pakistan, the crisis was a test of diplomacy and national security on a volatile frontier.